Okay, so we're going to have a look at one of the writing algorithm questions. This is actually quite a complicated question. To get full marks on this, you're going to have to use an array and you're going to have to use nested loops, so loops within loops. But we're going to have a look at how you could get a grade 9 answer without worrying about arrays or loops in loops. So the question says, the manager of a mobile phone shop has many staff members. Each staff member's monthly sales of mobile phone contracts are recorded over a period of 12 months. If a staff member sells more than 4 mobile phone contracts in 1 month, they're awarded a bonus. So, using Notepad, you're going to write an algorithm which inputs the number of staff members, inputs their monthly sales, outputs whether or not they got a bonus for that month, calculates their total for the year, outputs the total annual sales, their total yearly sales for each staff member, and then it says that there's a partially shown example below. So remember, this is just an example. There may be more or less staff members and they may have sold more or less phones. So this is just an example. So it says please enter the number of staff. So in this example they've chosen 3. So then it says enter month 1 figures for staff member 1, enter month 2 figures for staff member 1, and you can see this time they've awarded a bonus to them because they got over 4 sales. Then enter month 3 for staff member 1 and so on and so forth. And then as you can see, after month 12 for staff member 1, it moves on to month 1, but for staff member 2. And so on and so forth until you've done month 12 for staff member 3 in this example. It then outputs the total. So staff member 1 got this many, and it would carry on obviously going staff member 2, sold this many, and so on and so forth. So let's have a look at how we can gain some marks on this question then. So this is the initial question shown here. Now to start with, you're going to have to declare and initialize some variables. So any time that the question asks you to input something, that's going to need to be stored somewhere, so that's going to require a variable. And any time it asks you to calculate anything, that's going to need to be stored somewhere, so that's going to need a variable. So to start with, we can see here that it asks us to input the number of staff members. So what I've done on this question is we've declared a variable called num of staff. Now make sure that your variable names are all one word and it's clear to the examiner what's going to be stored in there. So here I've got num of staff. Now you could separate it with underscores if you wanted to, but I've just used camel casing and capitalised the first letter of each word. I've also put declare in capitals. You don't need to do that, but I just think it stands out nicely. It shows that you understand that you've got to declare this variable name. I've also set it as an integer, because obviously if it's the number of people, it's going to be a whole number. So therefore we're going to store it as an integer. We can't have half a person. We're also initializing that variable by setting the number of staff in this case to 0. Now we will change that as the program goes on, but we've initialized it at 0. So the next part of the question also says input the number of monthly sales. So the first person, they're going to sell something in January. We need to store that somewhere. So I've declared a variable called staff sales as integer. Again, I've chosen integer because you can't sell half a phone contract, so therefore it needs to be a whole number. And I've set that to 0 to start with. Obviously again that will change when the program runs. Now that's got us a mark already because we've declared and initialized some variables that we're going to use later on. I may have not included something, if I'm missing something out later in the thing, then I can come back and add it in. But essentially we've gained ourselves a mark there, so we're currently on 1 out of 9. Also in the question though, we need to calculate the total, so I ought to declare that variable. So I've declared the total as an integer and I've initialized that at 0. So moving on then to actually start writing the algorithm itself. So part of the question was that I need to input the number of staff members. So I've already got my variable num of staff. It's currently 0, but we need to change that. So to start with, I'm going to output to the screen a string literal, some text, something in speech marks. In this case, it's an instruction. You could do it as a question as well. So output, enter number of staff. I'm then storing whatever the person types in, the user types in my variable called num of staff. So I've got input num of staff. Again, I use capitals, but you don't have to. Therefore, we've just gained ourselves another 2 marks. One for outputting a string literal, and one for inputting into a variable. Now that's taken us up to a current mark of 3 out of 9, which is actually a grade 4 answer. working on sort of previous grade boundaries. Now obviously that might change, but even if it does change, that's still a good start to what is a very difficult question with writing very little code. So moving on then, this is all still the same code. I've just made it go grey so that we can focus on the bits that we're talking about. So inputs the number of monthly sales of mobile phone contracts for each staff member. So at this point, we're not going to write down enter month 1, enter month 2, enter month 3, because we're starting to repeat ourselves. So whenever you feel like you're repeating yourself with the same line of code over and over again, think about whether or not you could do it in a loop. So we know that there's going to be 12 months in our year, so therefore we could start off a loop that says for x equals 1 to 12. X could be I or J or whatever you want it to be, A, B, C, something like that. It's just a counter. So we're saying for x equals 1 to 12. So this loop's going to go around 12 times. Make it clear where the loop ends. You must end the loop if you're going to gain the mark for it. And you also must include something in there. So in this case, I've just said output, enter staff sales, and then store that in a variable called staff sales. So this is going to do this 12 times. It's going to say enter staff sales and then store it. Enter staff sales and store it. It's not right. It's not doing what we want it to do exactly yet. But you've now gained a mark because you understand that you need a loop. You've realised you're repeating yourself. You understand you need a loop. So therefore you're likely to pick up a mark for the concept of a loop, which takes us up to 4 out of 9. So moving on even further then. Another nice easy mark really. If a staff member sells more than 4 mobile phone contracts in 1 month, they're awarded a bonus, and it outputs whether or not they've got that bonus. So the clue's in the question really. It's if. Okay, it's a question. If they do this, it does one thing. If not, it does something else. So you've got selection there. So if staff sales, the number we've just entered, is bigger than 4, then output bonus awarded. Again, you must end the if. Just like you ended the loop, you must make it clear where the if ends. I've tabbed mine across as well, just to make it even more clear. You don't have to do that. It could all be in one line. However, you might find it easy for yourselves when looking back at your code as well, or your algorithm, to see where things start and end. So again, that's gained you another mark, because we now have selection, which has taken us up to 5 out of 9, which is a really good mark for quite a difficult question. However, another nice easy mark, or 2, is to calculate the total annual sales of each staff member and then to output that. So what we've got here is, we've got total, we're going to set that to be the current total plus the staff sales. So if we work through an example to see how that works, this is what they'd class as keeping track, and it's often done with a total. So total is currently 0. Imagine that we're going through our loop and we're putting in the number 4 for our first staff sale. So total, which is currently 0, is now going to become the current total, which is 0, plus the staff sales. So total now becomes 4. The next time round the loop, imagine that they only sold 2 phone contracts that month. So the total is now going to become the current total, which was 4, plus their new sales, which was 2, so the total now becomes 6. And that carries on for the 12 months. So we're keeping track of something. We're also then, after the loop finishes, outputting that to the screen. Simply output total. That's gained us 2 more marks, 1 for keeping track and 1 for outputting a variable, which now takes us up to 7 out of 9, which is a grade 9 answer. Doesn't do everything it should do, but we've picked up all the easy marks because we understand algorithms. We understand that we need variables. We understand that we need to output instructions to the screen and store the input in variables. We know that we need to have a loop there. We know that we need to do some selection and keep track of something and output variables to the screen. So therefore, when you're looking at these questions, think about your easy marks. Declare some variables and initialize them. So make sure that they're all one word and that they're sensibly named, that they're self-documenting. Output some text to the screen, make sure it goes in speech marks. Input things and output variables. So input and then name the variable, and output and then name the variable. Have a go at doing if statements. So if something's bigger than something else or equal to something, then do something. But don't forget to end the selection. Try having a go at a loop. Doesn't have to work 100%, just make sure you end it and there's something in it. And that might get you a mark. And keep track of something. It's normally a total. So total, and it's always what it is equal to itself plus something else. So that it's like adding on to it each time. So here are two different answers. So the first one is the one that we've just gone through, a 7 out of 9 answer. This one over here is an 100% answer, where we've got loops with inside loops, and we've got arrays, and we're using the index of the array to find out which member of staff it is, and so on and so forth. It's quite a complicated question, a little bit harsh of them really, the examiners. But if you want to have a look at that 100% answer, then obviously pause the video now, because most of you, if not all of you, are more than capable of doing this. But if you're struggling for time in the exam, resort back to just making sure you're picking up the easy marks first, and then if you do have time, come back to it later on.